Today I'm going to show you how to make a cutthroat cat's whisker snake fly. It's quite a mouthful, both in terms of the name and also the overall fly, but the general concept of tying the snake fly will remain the same, so you can actually make your own concoctions or follow this to the recipe. It's a great fly throughout the year. But especially so, I would say, in the winter months. It's got lots of movement. It's fairly buoyant. I'm actually going to put some dumbbell eyes on it, but without the dumbbell eyes, it's fairly buoyant. But it's just a great, it's got a fantastic amount of movement and does draw fish. If they're lethargic in the winter months, or again, you can fish them in throughout the year. Really, they're a devastating fly. Tied in all different lengths. That's one of the main thing that people find appeals to them from a snake fly perspective, is that you can tie really long flies where perhaps on conventional lures you would miss a lot of fish because the hook placement tends to be towards the front end of the fly. But actually with the snake, there's two ways of tying a snake. Actually, you can actually leave two hooks in place, one towards the eye and then one trailing way back on the fly, or as I tend to prefer to fish it, is just with the trailing hook. Actually, you tend to find that they tangle a lot less if you just leave the trailing hook at the end. Sometimes they do hit the head and you will miss a few fish as a result, but you know what, I think just fishing that trailing hook outweighs what you would lose out on those few hits towards the head. So for the trailing hook, I like to use a short shank wide gape hook, and I tend to use a straight eye on the back as well. You can use you can use a down eye. I wouldn't recommend an up eye just because of what's going to happen with the braid and stuff essentially, but in this instance I'm actually using a Partridge Nordic tube fly single. Great hook, really strong. I think they do make them in barbless now. This is actually a barbed which I've debarbed. Sizes probably 8 and 6 would be the two main sizes that you want to use. For the braid attachment, I'm actually using Power Pro braid. This is actually really strong stuff. This is like 40 something pound. To be honest, whatever you've got lying around, anything from, I would say, 15, 20 up to this strength, basically up to 40 pound or so. What you then need to do is just cut a really short length, 20 meters or so. This, it can depend on the size of or the length of the overall snake that you want to fish, but essentially just cut. It's not expensive stuff when you're buying a couple of 100 meters. So just tie enough that you have enough distance to work with. Basically, I've probably cut around 20-25 centimeters here. So really simple. It's the back end is just a no knot. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but there you go. It's basically just line the braid up and down the shank of the hook, switch hands, and then start bringing this back over the tag end and take that down probably around 10 turns down the shank. You can see I'm actually going over this length. It's pretty much what you would do when you're starting off tying with your tying thread down the hook. Pretty much the same process really. Just down about 10, and then bring it up and under the eye and just pull that tight, and you'll see it just sandwiches it all towards the eye of the hook. Then just cut off the excess. So that's the start of the mount. What you can do at this stage is super glue if you want, but I tend to bring the rabbit strip in at this point. So I'm using a Tiger Barred strip here, which is black over chartreuse and white. basically like a cat's whisker colours to begin with. So I'm going to bring up the tying thread, so whip over the braid like so. So that you've just got a thread base there. Bring up the rabbit, and what you need to do then is probably about 5mm in, create a empty patch, and when you find that empty patch, when you've managed to splay the fur either side, just wet your fingers and stroke that section back, and that will allow you to have a nice tie-in point. Offer that up, roll the skin around the shank somewhat, and then just secure it in. Just a few turns. There you go. Perfect. That's all you need to do then is whip finish this section. It's a lot easier if you can do it with your fingers, which thankfully I can. Just a couple, because we're just going to super glue after this anyway. Just 2 or 3. Make sure, if you can, that you're not trapping any of the fur down as you take it around. Get through to that stage, and then just use a needle or your whip finish tool and just draw it in, and that's done. Now I usually do up to this point in batches, because what we're going to do next is you're going to flip it over and we're going to put a little dab of super glue under, so that will secure the braid and also secure the rabbit strip in place. Easy as that. Just take it around the sides a little bit, so it actually you get a bond with the thread and the rabbit skin. This isn't going to pull out. You know, you're not going to get this braid pulling out. I don't care how big the rainbow is. That's a really strong mount. So that's the tail section done. What we then do is we move forward to the front hook. So a lot of people again leave this hook in place. That's pretty bend in that hook. You don't need any expensive hooks for the front hook, because essentially we're going to end up clipping this one. So all we do is take the thread. Again, you can use down eye if you want. I've just got a straight eye hook here. Again, that's all you're really needing from this front hook is the eye and the shank. You don't really need the bend of the hook or whatever, but it's obviously useful at this stage because you have something to work with in the vise. So take that thread down a little bit, back up towards the eye. That's all we do then. We bring back what we've already done with the tail mount. Take the braid in through the eye and pull it back, and at this stage you can measure the length of the snake. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to adjust the camera somewhat so you can see. Let's get you over that direction. There you go. Hopefully that's still in focus there. And that's all we're going to do now is, so you can measure, essentially that's all I need to do is pull that side or pull this side, and that will adjust the length of the snake. Essentially you need a load of different lengths. This time I'm probably going to make one which is around 5 to 6 centimeters long, so a couple of inches. So taking that through, the two lengths are now doubled up, and I'm pulling them pretty tight, as you can see. And when you're pulling them tight, take the thread over them. Try and hold the one that's got the trailing hook in, try and hold that on the top of the hook, just to keep everything streamlined. Take it back up, and that's it, done. So that's not going to pull out, and it's a really straight, streamlined connection. So this section goes out the way for a minute. You can actually just pull that back over the vise. Just leave it there. Next, we're going to put some dumbbell eyes in, if I can find them. So I've got some hot orange 4mm, I guess they're brass underneath, or stainless steel or something. Remember to turn the hook around. This is really important. If you were to put the dumbbells on top, like so, and then pull the rabbit over, what would actually happen is the weight is on top of the hook. Is actually weight on this side, and what that would actually do when it's fishing is flip the fly over. So what you actually need is the weight to be on the underside, like so, because then when you pull the rabbit over, it's actually going to stay with the rabbit on top and the weight underneath, which is exactly how you want it. So to do that, we just turn the hook around in the vise, move the rabbit strip out of the way, and just secure the dumbbells towards the eye, like so. Just take figure of 8 turns, and then a couple underneath. We're going to super glue at the end, so create a good secure bond now, but don't worry too much about it because we will be super gluing. Okay, so that's that. And then we just flip it back over. We're going to add some body material. For the body, I'm going to use, actually first and foremost, we're going to use some Flashaboo Magnum in like a barred orange. Really like this stuff. You can use rubber legs as well if you want to actually find this stuff to be a bit more mobile. And can be easy to work with as well. It's going to take 4 strands. Cut them long. You can just alter the length at the end. Just pinch and loop them up on top of the shank, like so. That's fine, doesn't have to be anything more fancy than that. Then for the body, we're going to use a large crystal hackle in fluorescent chartreuse. Again, you can just vary these colours as you see fit to your favourite colours. You can create some, Viva variations. You can, your black and greens essentially. You can create some, just your olives, whatever takes your fancy. You can create some big kind of sparkler type stuff. So with a crystal hackle, we're just going to secure it on top of the shank. Take your thread over back towards the dumbbell eyes, and then it's just a case of touching turns, just palmering it down the body. We're actually going to brush this out, so don't worry too much if it does get trapped or looks a bit messy. Doesn't matter at this stage. Take 3 or 4 turns down towards the dumbbell eyes, and then secure it off. That's fine. Snip it off like so. Now we're going to pull the rabbit over the top. So really important, basically not to draw the rabbit too tight and not to leave it too loose either. So essentially it needs to be at the same length, or adjusted the same as the braid loop. So if you see the braid is down here, we're just going to lay it on top, not stretching it. So to make sure that it's in line, and lay it on top. So don't stretch it, just lay it on top like it would not naturally fall. And then when you let it go, you should see that the braid just flows with the rabbit rather than being in a loop or too taut. It just flows with the rabbit. Secure there. Brush back, wet your fingers, brush back the rabbit, and then just secure the rabbit in place. Good few touching turns. So that's it there. You can see it just coming together now. And then we're going to snip the excess rabbit strip as close as you can. Snip that back. If you're just fishing a cat's whisker version, you can actually just put the Chartreuse crystal hackle back in front. But I'm actually going to do a cutthroat cat here, which will have fluorescent orange, fluorescent red, something, whichever takes your fancy basically. I'm colorblind, so you can tell me which one I'm using. I think it's like a hot fluorescent orange. And we're just going to cut a short length of that. Just secure it in where you finish the rabbit off. Just like so. Tidy that up a bit so the white doesn't peep through the skin of the rabbit strip. And then just take 3 or 4 turns of the crystal hackle behind the dumbbell eyes, and that's the fly finished. Now I just have to tidy it up. So finish that off. Just some tight touching turns behind the dumbbell eyes. Snip it off at the base, like so. Brush everything back. Bring in the whip finish tool. Make sure you're not trapping any fibers as you do. 4 or 5 turns. And just draw that down. Pull that tight, snip it off, and then bring in some super glue. Again, you can vary all these colors, so I'm just showing you one example here. The principle of setting up the snake fly, the mount and everything is exactly the same, so you just need to vary the colors. This one does work really well though, really well. Just dab that in so it soaks in behind that dumbbell, and also it does brush that orange or red material back as well. So all you need to do next is brush this back so that there are no trapped fibers. That just helps the movement in the water. It doesn't have any fibers restricted. So just brush all of that back. And that's the fly done. You can see it's a pretty simple process. The only thing you then need to do is take your pliers and snip this off at the bend, which I'll do now. Just take that up, draw all the materials back so you've got the shank of the hook exposed, like so. Take the pliers up, make sure you're not trapping any braid when you're doing this. Just hold it there and put your finger the other side of the pliers, otherwise that hook bend is going to fire off and you might find it in your foot a week later. And that, after you've done that, you can see then there's no hook at the front, just that trailing hook at the back. So a lot of people do like leaving this one at the front. Again, I prefer to clip it, because what happens if you don't, a lot of the time this one, the back hook comes and catches the front hook. So I prefer, and even from an unhooking perspective, what you can sometimes find is if the fish takes this trailing hook, literally if it's just nipped in the front of the mouth, this hook can actually, especially if on the longer snakes, can come back and catch the fish's eye. So actually from an ethical perspective, I do prefer just fishing the one hook and just that trailing hook. The the barred flashabou. So all we do now is just trim them to different lengths. I don't like any of them protruding longer than the rabbit, so just snip them back so all of them are actually within the confines of that rabbit. But that's the fly finished. Hope that helps, and hope you can tie a few and catch a few fish.